Oh, that was loud. Okay. Recording has begun. I think I might as well just go ahead and start sharing my screen. Um, blah, 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 blah. Let me know if you guys can see my screen.
Yep.
Yeah, we can see.
Oh, I love this screen.
I'm sorry.
I love this one.
I didn't get that.
He said,
Perhaps your
he
Your
said,
screen. Your
Oh, my
network
screensaver.
screen. I
Oh,
love this
oh,
one.
oh,
pretty
oh.
good.
Sorry. Thank you. Yeah,
yeah,
You're
that's One
welcome.
Piece.
the reference to your animes, that one he loves.
Yes, right. Well, it's a community. Everything has a community. Software has a community. Anime does the same. So it brings people together, and it gives you conversations. It gives you conversational topics that you can relate to and expand. So everything is a learning experience, I suppose. Intriguing enough.
Of
Okay.
course. Don't get me
Um,
started on this. Then the rest of people is going to run away.
it's a never-ending topic.
Of course it is.
All right, so are you guys what screen are you guys seeing right now?
Intro to
Intro
manual
to
testing
manual
2.
testing too.
Are you seeing the one with the notes, or are you
Yes.
seeing
Yeah.
okay, so this is not let's go to the display settings, and there you go. So this is what it's supposed to be like. How about now?
Right now we just saw the PowerPoint one, not the note.
Okay, so you're seeing the full screen now of the presentation.
Yes.
Beautiful. That's exactly what we wanted. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about our continuation to manual testing. There's a lot that's going to be coming. We're going to be looking at test planning. We're going to be looking at measurements. This is about traceability matrix, and then we're going to be looking at tools as well. So tools like HPALM, and although I'm pretty sure whatever you go, you might not end up using that legacy tool. It's good to know its basics, its fundamental principles and usages just for interview questions, just in case somebody tends to go legacy style or vintage, like I like to call it. We're not going to be seeing the entire structure today. Today we're going to be going in introducing part of what makes up test planning, and then we're going to go on full test planning mode on the next lecture. So my lectures are going to be carrying on Wednesdays from now on. So we'll be seeing each other or talking to each other every Wednesday for now until we complete the entire agenda that comprises manual testing and really its principles. Now, last class, before that actually, let's dig on a quote that I ponder on a lot. I tend to ponder on a lot. And this quote is by Benjamin Franklin. Now before we go into this quote, who can tell me who Benjamin Franklin was? All right, without Googling, guys, be honest. Whoever can tell me who Benjamin Franklin was is going to get a $25 Amazon gift card.
He's on the $100 bill.
Founding
Okay.
father of United States.
President?
Sure. Those are all things that he
He wasn't
was.
a president. He was an inventor. I don't think he was president though.
Scientist. No, he
He
was
was
a scientist and writer.
Inventor.
Yeah.
Writer and scientist.
Okay. So who says he was a president and who says he wasn't?
I said he was not. Syed said he was not a president.
Okay.
Actually, he has a lot of quality. I just searched Google. So I
He
found-
was one
was-
second,
he was
guys.
a
He has a lot
philosopher,
of quality.
you know?
He's author, writer, politician, inventor, lot of stuff.
No, but he did a declaration of, the independence. He helped on during that time too. I mean, I study about his, in my history class, but I don't remember much about it. But, the most important part where he was famous about, he helped during the Declaration of Independence.
Okay, who was this?
That's me, Mawish.
Mawish Dar.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, that's pretty accurate there.
I
It's
know him
pretty
as the
accurate.
one with
During the
electricity,
American
right?
Revolution time, that's what I, studied about. So that's what I just remember. I cannot, claim like I
Right.
remember everything. I'm not too much into the history, but that's what he was famous about.
Right. Well, you're not wrong, and I'll take that. I'll take
You
that.
can
I'm not
explain
sure.
more.
Well-
But I do read his quotes. I like his quotes very much,
Very good. Yeah, he has very inspirational quotes.
Right.
Very life relatable. But to just a little background of Benjamin Franklin. He was the only president that was not a president,
Yep.
if that makes sense.
Because he was the founding father of the United States.
That's right. He was one of them. Yes, he was one of them. He helped draft the Declaration of Independence, as it was mentioned. And he was also one of its signers. All right. Now, one of the important things that he also did is he already began being a diplomat for the United States way back when, in France during the American Revolution. So the assistance that the US got during the revolution against Great Britain that kept coming from France was because Benjamin Franklin was there being a representative for our government. And likewise, it could be said the same for Lafayette, Marquis de Lafayette. He was a great general in France, who was also a delegate here in the United States back then, who also actually fought during the revolution. But more important, he was a delegate to the Constitutional Convention. The Constitutional Convention was or happened around 1987-ish. I hope I'm not butchering that. But it lasted for about 5 years. The Constitutional Convention was actually where the Constitution, which is our document that dictates the basic laws of our governing nation, were drafted and signed and implemented. All right, this is when the declarations, the Articles of Confederation became obsolete and replaced by what we know today, that has lived for hundreds of years as the Constitution of the United States. So just a little background of how important this character here was. Okay, he was a statesman, he was a diplomat, a printer. Okay, he was a publisher, a political philosopher. He was a writer as well as a scientist. So this man here had so many accomplishments. He was so well educated, had extensive knowledge about so many things. So much so that he even worked as a printer. He was printing papers, aside from being all of these amazing things in life. That's what Benjamin Franklin was, one of the founding fathers of this nation, and also one of the persons who inspired me a lot in a daily basis. So tell me and I forget. Teach me and I remember. Involve me and I learn. So three very simple short sentences that, if you really pay attention to them, mean so much. When you tell me something, with so many things that you hear, how will you remember? But if you sit down, if you take notes, if you're learning from somebody, you begin to learn, because you begin to, your brain, your subconscious begins to take in, But when you actually begin to implement yourself, right, to involve yourself in the processes of things, that is when you truly learn. And the same can be said for software engineering, software development, software testing. The same can be said, because until you apply yourself, until you continue to try and do and fail, you won't know how to fix things, how to be better. It's one of the things about applying yourselves in anything that you learn. Many of you mentioned already that you're struggling with, or not struggling, but maybe coming across some issues in the prior lessons that you had. Say API, say Cucumber, the automation framework, and yes, you will come across these issues. You will come across obstacles. But you're right now, right here, right now, not only are you learning from someone who's teaching you, but you're also trying to implement yourself, to involve yourself by doing some of the work. So very important things to remember, guys. When you learn something, put it to use, even if it's in your kitchen. Put it to use, because when you put it to use, it's when you actually start picking things up. Okay, so as you learn Java, as you learn Gherkin, Cucumber, BDD, as you learn all of these tools, as you learn how to write your first automation scripts, you need to go on a website that you like. Go on your favorite website, right? If you're a gamer, go to a gamer website that you enjoy. If you love cooking, go to a cooking website and start looking at the developer code, at the developer tools. Start looking at the elements there. Try to understand every time you hover over it, and try to do something with it. Try to read the text in the page. Try to click on something that's there. Try to do simple things. Because when you do that, you're gonna surprise yourselves. Okay, you think you're not learning because you're doing little by little things, little by little. But you know, if you compare yourselves from when you started, you didn't know most of these things. So you know, implement it. And that's what I wanted to say about that quote. And where is she? My wish Dar gets a $25 gift card from Amazon.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
All right.
Congratulations.
Very well.
$25.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. Next time, make sure you're paying attention. It could be you to get $25 gifts just from Amazon.
Thank you.
No, next time I think next time we all gonna be, just refresh our memories what we studied,
Right. Ready to jump in at the next one. Okay.
Yep.
Very good. Now let's talk about some of the content. We're gonna let's talk let's devote a couple of minutes to some recap here, guys. So last time, who can give me a quick summary of what we got last time? All right, I'm gonna pick on somebody now. Rezwan. I hope I didn't butcher your name.
Yep. Hi. I think you pick up the wrong guy because today's my first class with you. So
Today's your first
Yes.
lesson.
Yes, with you.
Have you seen any of the videos, any of the recordings?
No, actually, I don't know what was your topic. That's why.
Okay, interesting. All right, I'll check in with Shanto. I think I should have sent you a link to look at all the recordings before you join the class, but okay. So more than likely you're going to be lost. And there's a lot of things in terms that you want to understand. So take a lot of notes so that when you watch the other videos, the prior videos, you'll be able to then connect the dots. Okay.
Okay. Thank you
If
so
you have
much.
any questions, just ping me and I'll sit down with you.
Okay.
Okay. Well, since I ended up picking the new guy, although I don't know what's wrong with picking on the new guy. That's normally what happens, right? We pick on the new guy. Let's see. Horama Rima.
Yeah.
You're not gonna tell me you're new too, right?
No.
Okay, very good. So can you go over a quick summary of our last session?
I think we did the last session into true manual testing for the SDLC, STLC, and bug life cycle,
Yep, that's right.
and label and type of testing, functional testing and non-functional testing.
Yep, that's right. So let me let me throw a question. Who of you have gone back to look at those notes that you took to refresh your mind, to your memory about what types of testings exist, what SDLC is, how SDLC flows?
I just looked at the flow chart. I think that covers most of the thing,
Okay.
if I'm right.
Looking at the flow chart, can you walk me through the flow chart really quickly?
So the flow chart is like SDLC, STLC, and defect life cycle. So do you want, I can show you I can share my screen. I have or you want me to explain it?
You can explain it.
Okay, so in the requirement, in SDLC, the requirement analysis, I mean, there are 7 phases in the SDLC, which is requirement, design, coding, testing, deployment, and maintenance. And STLC has 6. I mean, both are 6 basically. So requirement analysis for STLC, test planning, test case development, test environment setup, test execution, and test cycle closure. And from test execution, when a bug is found, I'm actually confused here in the defect lifecycle.
Okay, so let's do something. Let's do something here. Can you guys see this the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so you started right over here at the STLC process, and then you made it to the testing, and then you said that you get confused about the testing life cycle.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just do a quick recap on this, just using this flow chart that I created. So STLC process, where everything begins, guys, remember that it all starts with the requirement analysis, moving into the design. Okay, I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty parts of what they all mean because we already did that. You know, you should all be able to follow me. So requirement analysis, right, where everybody gets together, starts understanding the requirement, gets the design going, that right, of what's going to happen. Implementation occurs, which is coding, obviously, and then we move into testing. Now, testing, if you notice, before this continues on, so there is actually something here that deviates right before it carries on, and that is that when you begin, when you move to the testing phase, you start a whole new process flow. Okay, and the process flow, once again, is the STLC. Okay, this is actually good for what was the name? Rezwan, sorry.
Yep.
So from STLC process, now we do the same thing, just like we start in the STLC. We have to gather requirements. Okay, we have to analyze those requirements. Then we go into the test planning mode. Okay, test planning mode. I think we're going to touch on that a little bit today. Test planning mode. From test planning, then we move into the test case development, which we will also see today. So from test case development, then we move into the environment setup. So environment setups, once again, which environment we're going to be working on, which browser, blah, 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 nitty gritty parts of it. Then once
Here
we
I had
get
a
all,
question. Actually, both
yeah,
SDLC and STLC for manual testing or automation testing, both, or only SDLC used in automation and STLC used in manual?
no matter what you do, manual testing, automation testing, performance testing, everything follows the STLC process.
SDLC process. Okay.
Yes. And if you're a tester, you follow both. Okay. Your main goal here is the STLC, but you also have to involve yourself in the STLC, because without STLC, there's no way that you'll be able to understand STLC. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Very good. So moving into the test execution part right here, now you're going to begin executing all of your test cases that you've done. And now we get into the nice details of whether you pass or fail the test case, right? So whether the functionality, the behavior is acting as expected. So if you got a yes, okay, then we close that test case and we come up right here. And then we continue the STLC process that goes into the deployment and then into maintenance mode. And that's a happy path here that we will always like. However, things are not always that happy. Okay, let's just look at life. Life wouldn't be life if it didn't have so many complications, right? So when it fails, then, okay, when we fail at life, so now we go into a whole different cycle here. So remember, now we started off at the STLC process flow or cycle. Then we went into the testing cycle. Now we're going into the bug or defect cycle. Okay, so once you fail and we enter the bug life cycle here, now this begins a whole new process. The new process begins by creating new defects. Okay, analyzing that with the PO or the BA. Now the analysis is going to jump into whether is it a valid defect. If no, then you reject the status and you close it, and you close the test, and you carry on with the deployment and then to maintenance. However, if it is a valid defect, now we're going to find out whether it is in scope. And we talked about that in the last class. So if it is not, then we defer it. And if we defer it, once again, we follow that process again where we close the defect, open it into a user story, and then close the test, and then carry on into our STLC process. However, if it is in scope, now we have one final barrier here. Has it already been raised? If no, then it is a duplicate. What happens if it's a duplicate? We don't like duplicates. We close it. So once we close it again, the same process. Close the test case, bring it to the testing, and carry on with STLC on deployment and then maintenance. However, again, has it already been raised? And it is a no. Oh, this actually, I did that wrong. I have to change that. This is supposed to be yes here for if it's a duplicate, and then no for the actual process to continue. So we'll just do that now, right? Since we're right here, why not do that? And we're gonna bring this bad boy over here. Okay, so once we get that no, it's not a duplicate, that means it is. That means we carry on with the process. So now that it's not a duplicate, we verified that it is a valid defect, it is in scope, and it hasn't been raised already. Now we're gonna go into acknowledging that this is an actual defect and move on and assign it to the developer, right? So now the developer is gonna work on the defect. The status is gonna be set to in progress. Once the developer comes back to you and says, hey, I fixed it, right? The status changes to fix, and then it moves into retesting phase. So the retesting now comes back over here into the test execution phase, okay? Which we brought right back here. So if the retesting passes, if yes, then we close it, and then we carry on, close the test case here, close the defect, close the test case, and carry on with STLC until deployment and maintenance. However, if it does not pass, which happens a lot, okay, because when you fix something, when you tweak a module, you might end up messing up another module, okay, into a different class of the code. So if it's not fixed, then the status is then set to reopen, and it goes back to the developer, and this process continues on and on until the test passes. Okay, which ends up over here.
So I have another question. So what is scope?
What is scope?
Yeah, I know that scope and scope or out of scope. I know the word.
Where did you see that? Did I have that here?
Yeah, it's here. Right.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Is
right
it in
here.
scope? Yes.
So is it in scope? So the word scope in this context means whether the test case, whether the behavior or functionality that was found here, right, in this valid defect right here, is in the scope of going into this release. So you have a release, and the functionality that you're working on is planned for that release. Now, if the defect that you found that is valid it's actually not a part of the requirements that is planned for the release, then this is considered out of scope. And because it is out of scope, it gets deferred. Deferred means that it gets moved outside of the requirement. So it gets unassigned and it goes back into the backlog as a user story that it's going to be worked on either on the next sprint or on the next release.
Which one is not required, I can put it in scope.
Say that again.
Okay. So which one is not a requirement of the project, like requirement of the software?
The
So
requirement of the
if I
project is
find-
back here, okay?
Okay.
Remember.
So after after completing the software, I found something that which was not in requirement.
Mhm. Okay.
Can I
So
suggest it's a bug or just out of scope?
it is a bug that is out of scope. Once again,
So
if it is a valid bug that you find,
Mhm.
but
Yeah,
it
it's
is
valid bug,
yeah,
but it's out of scope because it's not requirement.
exactly. It's not a part of the requirement, therefore it is out of scope. Now,
Mhm.
there are instances where you're gonna come across the words, it was a miss requirement.
Okay.
What that means is that the BA or the PO did not account for that. Now, this defect, even though it was not in the requirement, it's necessary for the release because without it, something else is going to fail in production. So that is called a misrequirement because it belongs in the requirement, but it was missed by the PA or the product owner. And so we have to do a quick fix on that matter. So we have to now sit down, see if we can implement it within the time frame that we have. If we cannot implement it within the time frame that we have, then we have to consider moving it out of scope along with any other dependency, predecessor or any predecessor that it may be associated with. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Very good. So in scope, it is within the requirement parameters. Out of scope, it is outside of the requirement parameters. Okay. Any other questions on this?
Socrates.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you ask this the same thing last class? You asked for a student to prepare.
I did.
Is that the one? Yeah. It's
Yeah.
very nice. This is very nice looking.
This is mine. Don't copy mine. You get your
Yeah,
own.
I know this is you, but you asking for every student last
Yes,
class.
that's right. So every student was supposed to send it to me through Jesus, what's the name? I forget the name of this app all the time. Slack. See,
Yeah.
my brain is slacking.
Yeah, you can give us, please.
I
Sure.
submitted to in the email, but I didn't get any feedback.
Yeah, I also submitted, but my one is not
I have to check. Did you guys send it to my DTA
so
email?
clear.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll be sure to go over it. Regardless, I'm gonna send you the file. I'm gonna send you the URI for this diagram so you guys can have it and compare it. Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. But again, you know, even I had a defect here, right? Even I had a little mistake here, okay? That only because I looked at it again, I noticed it. So look at that. So once again, when you implement yourself, when you do the work, only then can you see where you make a mistake, and only then can you see what how you can fix it. Although this is not exactly a great example. But okay, very good. Let's carry on. Very good. So everybody feeling good about that recap? Did it bring back memories? Juggle your brain there and started coming down memory lane, jumping and holding hands with STLC and STLC.
Yes, teacher.
Yes.
Okay, I was kind of waiting for the answer there, but okay. All right, now that we're over that recap, let's talk about the test scenarios and what else we're going to be covering for today. We're going to be covering test scenarios, how to write test cases, and test data generation. Very subtle, important topics here. So test scenarios, guys. These are the this is where you begin really to expand your input. Okay, this is where you become you. This is where you own the product. Okay, so the simplest description that I could think of for what a test scenario is that is any functionality of the application under test that can be tested. Okay, if it cannot be tested, then there's no need for us to create test scenarios. It's that simple, right? So with that said, let's talk about why we created. Let's talk about when we should not create them. And maybe also let's talk about how do you write them, right? The purpose of the scenario of scenarios is once again to test the end-to-end process of our requirement. The problem can be complex, can be simple, but the scenarios help to bring evaluation, right, to anything that is more complex. That's something you can really apply to your daily lives as well. When you apply scenarios to your daily life, you begin to think about what is involved within those scenarios. If you say, all right, I'm gonna wake up today and I'm gonna go to the library, and I'm gonna read this book, right? That's a scenario that you're already giving yourself. Okay, but it involves other steps. It involves other things. You don't just wake up, take care of your necessities, and then get changed, and then go into the library, and then appear in the library. It doesn't work that way. It involves a lot of things, a lot of steps, right? So we're gonna go around those steps also in a moment. But why do we create these test scenarios, right? So we're creating these test scenarios once again, so we can ensure that we have complete coverage of what the requirement given to us is or has, right? Test scenarios need to be, they don't have to, it depends on the team, but more often than not, they should be approved by the stakeholders. This would be your BAs, your POs, right? Even your Scrum Master sometimes can be that person as well. The developers can also be a very good peer to work with, to present the test scenarios, to make sure that you have complete coverage. And that's important there, guys. Don't ever be afraid to think that you shouldn't consider asking the developers anything about, say, whether you have enough coverage or not. Okay, you should always ask, hey, these are my scenarios, what do you think? Do you think this covers everything that you worked on? Right? This is actually good communication between testers and developers, which is very much needed to really succeed. They also help determine the most important end-to-end transactions, for any real use of the software application. So really, whenever you're thinking about creating a test scenario, you have to consider You have to start thinking like an actual user, right? That's your job, really, to think like a user, to think how the user is going to use this application. So it involves a lot of things. So you have to, that's where your analytical prowess blooms. Okay. And also, believe it or not, it teaches you a lot more about the application. Whether you believe it or not, you think the developer might be the person that knows the most about the application. No, when you're the person doing all of the testing, in the end, at the end of the day, you become the almost like the SME of the application, because you're the one who's testing every crony little corner of this application, guys, of the software. So, it teaches you a lot. Now, when not to create test scenarios. Um, once again, if it's not an application that is not under test, there's no need to create scenarios. Vague but truth. Now, an application under test can be complicated. It can be unstable. There can be crunch time in a project, which happens a lot, especially on projects that follow agile methodology. Scrum, Kanban. Some of those sometimes may not create test scenarios. They jump directly into test cases. So in this events, you don't really just create scenarios. You jump right directly into the test cases. But that it is expected of you to be very thorough with your test cases. So for your own good, it's always good to think about scenarios as well in that case. You also may not need to create scenarios when you're doing bug fixes or where you're doing regression testing. Those things really don't require scenario creation. The regression testing only looks at the test case coverage, and bug fixes already has test cases created when you think about it. So it is already a part of a scenario. And that's it, I think. Yeah. Now, how do you write them? Now, how to write them it's where things become a little more complex, right? So I noted them here on this side. You know what? Where's my laser? I want to do laser pointing.
So here I have a question.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's happened without writing scenario or test cases. So can you make an application? Is it possible?
You can make an application without writing test scenarios and test cases, but you bet it's gonna have a lot of issues.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is this famous incident that happened in Microsoft. This is a long time ago, guys. But Microsoft, I think, was planning to showcase in there are these massive conventions, right, for tech companies. And Microsoft, being the giant that it was, they wanted to present this awesome thing, I think, on a computer or something. And they didn't do any testing on it. And guess what happened? They got the blue screen of death. So it's called the blue screen of death because essentially your application crashes. So your program dies.
And of course, no one knows where is the bug.
Yeah. So well, it was an actual issue. It wasn't tested, and it messed up that presentation. You know how embarrassing that is? That's super embarrassing. It's almost like as embarrassing as Elon Musk claiming that the window on the Cybertruck couldn't break, and the first throw of the ball just shatters the glass. It's like, damn, it's embarrassing. It didn't. I mean, correction, it did not shatter it, but it did crack it, right? Now, to his point, he said he wouldn't, break it, but he did. Another issue that happened was, I think this was with American Airlines, or one of those airlines way back when, they actually had a bug that started, I think, canceling a bunch of flights, and something happened, something massive happened. This airline ended up losing like hundreds of millions of dollars, like about $850 million, I think they lost, in lawsuits and a bunch of stuff, because the software was not tested, or it was not tested properly. So it is events like this really that make sure that companies understand that they have to have a testing team, that things need to be tested in order for them to be released into production. All right, so I think I digress here. So back to the last question here: how did you write them? And now there's a couple of steps here that we can look at on how to write them. So take this into consideration. Okay, so you have to read the requirement. Obviously, we've gone over this a lot. You have to read the requirements, understand the requirements of the system under test, right? And you can have use cases. You can read books, manuals, anything that is related to the requirements. Okay, it's not like you're just gonna pick up a random book and you're gonna start reading it. Like, you're not gonna pick up the Lord of the Rings and you're gonna think that it's gonna help you test the application, unless it is a Lord of the Rings application. So I hope everybody knows what use cases are. Okay, very good. So taking this into consideration now, we're looking at a step where you're just analyzing all of these requirements, right? You're understanding from a contextual point of view. Okay. Point number two would be, for each of those requirements that you're already looking at, strategize possible user actions. I mentioned this before. You got to think like a user. So strategize like a user action, your possible user action. So if I'm the user, you're the tester, think what I'm going to do. Think what I would do. Put yourself in my shoes. Okay. So the only way you can do that is by knowing what the application does. So you can say like, okay, the application is supposed to begin create click see if I click on this button, it's going to take me to the claim creation screen. So as a user, that you think what I'm going to do is you're going to click on that button and then you're going to be taken to the claim creation screen. If you're in a claim creation screen, you're going to assume that I'm going to create a claim. Now the data that I'm going to input, you have no idea, but you're going to figure it out because you're going to try everything. So knowing the objective is helpful. Okay, as well as the understanding of the technical aspects of the application. So this is where you talk with the developer. Okay, developers will be your best friends in explaining to you the technicalities of the module, the class, or functionality, behavior, or what expected behavior should be if you don't understand something. Okay, so think of loopholes. Okay, think of loopholes that you can find. So how to break the application. Okay, this is very important. If you can break the application, you did a 120% good job. Step 3 is, once you understand the requirements, you got to work on developing any possible scenarios for each of the features. So you have one scenario, you have one requirement, right? You understand the requirement, write a scenario for that requirement, right? Each requirement should be its own module, its own functionality. So write a scenario for that requirement, or for the feature of the requirement. Now, once you identified all the possible scenarios, depending on how big the application is, or how the sprint was in an agile team, you could have as many as 9 scenarios. But that's really not ideal. If you have that many, that means you're actually in a waterfall model. But once you identify all the possible scenarios, you got to work on a TM or RTM. So this is traceability metrics or requirement traceability metrics to verify coverage. We're not going to cover traceability metrics here, but just to give you a little background of it, this is really how you track your coverage. Okay. This is very important. We're going to touch on this on the next lesson along with test planning. Number 5, we're going to review this, your scenarios. So you're going to take it to your PO. You're going to have a session where you're going to say, okay, guys, so these are all the scenarios that I'm considering. It doesn't have to be a meeting, anything crazy like that. You can just send them an IM. You can send them an email, or you can do the 3 amigos approach. The 3 amigos is where you meet with a developer and you meet with either the PO, BA, or even the Scrum Master, if the Scrum Master is an SME of the application. But more often than not, your PO will be your go-to person, or the BA in his place or her place. So you meet with these 2 people. That's called the 3 amigos. You meet for about 5 minutes, 10 if you need to, and you guys can go over that. You say, hey guys, so these are all the scenarios that I thought of. Do you think I'm missing something? Do you guys, can you think of something else that might, that would be in scope? Okay. So this is very important. And once again, that communication is imperative to success. Okay, so a couple of tips for you really when you're looking at test scenarios is, it should be tied to a minimum of 1 requirement, like I mentioned before. So if you have 1 user story, you know, you should have 1 scenario. You should have 1 scenario for that user story, because a user story should be only 1 module. So the user story is about creating a drop down. So your scenario should be validating the drop down. Now, what comes after that? We're going to go into that in the next slide. Also think that maybe before creating the test scenarios, that might need to verify a lot of requirements at once. You might want to think of having a test scenario that checks the requirement in its isolation, okay, and its individuality. And don't make it complex. Okay, make it as simple as possible. Once again, if you have to check a drop down, just say validating a drop down. It's as simple as that. You don't have to go crazy or bananas and trying to come up with crazy words, trying to like say, okay, my scenario is gonna test the complexity of clicking a drop down and validating the values to ensure none of that. That's boring. Simple is best. And I think I mentioned this earlier, but you should not have a lot of scenarios. Having too many scenarios, it's actually expensive to run. Why is it expensive? Because you as a tester have to spend more time. So when you spend more time, it pushes things back more. Okay, because you need X amount of capacity in a sprint. Okay, so make sure that when you review them, when you review the scenarios, make sure that everybody knows what you're doing. Be concise, be precise, and be eloquent. Okay, let's see. I think I had a little. So let me give you a sample of what that scenario will be. And I'm gonna be and you guys are already creating test scenarios without knowing, I think, or maybe you do know. But when you guys were working on animation with Jewel, you guys are already working on test scenarios. Your feature file is a scenario. Okay. And then the scenarios in a feature file are actually your test cases. So you're already working on things without having gone through the basics of it. So you'll be very familiar with it. So now take into account this scenario. It's basically looking at an e-commerce app. Okay, we're gonna look at Amazon because why not? Right? They are sponsoring this video. That's why That's what Miss Dar is getting Mawish Dar is getting a $25 gift card from Amazon because they're sponsoring. That's not true. I'm just kidding. So there you go. There's a laughter. So the test scenario. So we have one test scenario right here. Check the login functionality. Now there's a screenshot right here that I got here. So look at this screenshot. It has a sign in. The simple layout is email. Now that email says in parentheses phone for mobile accounts. Okay, so not only do you have email, you can also check with phone, and then you have the password. You have a forgot your password link. You have a button right here that says sign in. You have a checkbox here that says get me signed in. You have a details drop down here. Then you have some text here that says if you have an account, then create an account, right? So now let me walk you through what it entails to create a scenario and what follows after. What follows after creating a scenario is the test cases. A test case is how you break down a scenario to a granular level. Okay. So this is what the difference is between test scenario and test cases. A test case resides within the scenario. So if we're looking at the login functionality here that we're discussing, let's take a look at the some of the test cases that we will see. So I should have hit the ribbon. So we got
So
here.
what is the big thing? Is test case or test scenario?
I'm sorry, what?
So what is the big thing in a case like test case or test scenario?
Well, they're both important. And once again, if you're not in an agile team that doesn't write scenarios, you're gonna go directly into test cases.
Okay, we
Otherwise-
write test cases under the test scenario, or we write test scenario under the test case.
So take it. So look at it this way, and we're gonna cover this later. But in a test plan, you're not gonna write each and every test case. Okay. In a test plan, when you're writing a test plan, what you're gonna do is when you start talking about scope, what's in scope, what's gonna be out of scope. When you're talking about these things, you're gonna be talking about the scenarios. Okay, so the scenarios are comprised of test cases because this is what it entails to test a scenario. Once again, in a feature file. Who is this asking, by the way? Is it Rizwan?
Yes.
Okay, Rizwan. So for a quick understanding, Rizwan, and we can connect offline if you like to. A test plan is a document that a tester is supposed to write when it comes down to end-to-end in order to account for all the testing that's going to be in scope. We discussed what's in scope earlier, right? About the requirements. So this test plan is gonna have certain information. It's gonna talk about tools used. It's gonna talk about maybe time constraints. It's gonna talk about risks, dependencies, right? It's gonna talk a lot about a lot of these things. You know what the overview is gonna be. So the overview, we're talking about what the overall coverage should be. So what the scenarios of the test cases or your testing itself is going to cover, and that should all be within the requirements that you read, and that you're familiar with. So with that said, did that help? There's one.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're confused, just
So
put a note
so,
on it. Put a
no
note on
problem.
it.
I got it. So the test scenario is the way in every possible way to write the test case, right?
Yes, a scenario is the parent. Is the parent of a test case, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, so really quickly here. So check the system behavior when valid email ID and password is entered. Okay, so this is happy path. Okay, now check the system behavior when invalid email but valid password is entered. Now, if you click sign in and it goes through, that's a defect. Now check the system behavior when valid email ID and invalid password is entered. If it goes through, this is a defect. Now, check the system behavior when invalid email and ID and invalid password is entered. If it goes through, it's a defect, okay? So I highlighted these words here because they're very important. You can see them in different places here, right? In different combinations, because that's what you should be thinking about. Your test coverage should be looking at every possible situation. So your scenario about checking login functionality, the login functionality means that you're looking through every one of these test cases to make sure that this functionality works, that the login functionality works as intended. Okay. Now check the system behavior when the email ID and password are left blank and sign in is prompted. So once again, so if you leave everything blank and you try to sign in, it should still give you an error. If it doesn't give you an error, then that's a defect. Now, click on the forget password is working as expected. So if you click it, should take you to a different page? Does it take you? Does it prompt you to enter an email to retrieve your password? You know, any of those things. That's all depending on your requirements. Again, right? The expected behavior. Now check the behavior when valid invalid phone number and password is entered. So now that you did it all with the email address, remember that what I said before, you can also sign in with your phone. So you want to make sure that all of these scenarios also apply to the phone number. So not only do you have this 4 scenario here, or this 5 scenario here, well, yeah, just essentially 4. This 4 turned into 8. So this is essentially between 1 and 4, actually 8 scenarios here. Okay, and then you have the extra 3 here. Check the system behavior when you click when clicked on keep me sign in is checked. Okay, so this really between and you missed one because I missed one because I didn't do the one for the details. So another one is that you can validate the context within the details link here, right? Another one is that you can validate the button right here or creating your account. But remember, the scenario is login functionality. So you don't really have to go into this because this is not part of the login functionality unless unless you have a scenario that says check the functionality or the behavior for creating a new account. Okay, so that will be an entirely new scenario. When keep me sign in now this, however, is in scope because when you say keep me sign in, now you have to test, and now you have other tests here where you say, okay, I clicked on keep me sign in. Now you want to verify that if you do a timeout, it's going to keep you sign in. Okay, so it's gonna keep your credentials there for you to sign in again easy. So that's what a scenario entails. It entails creating a kind of just really like over the top context here, you know, to test the behavior of a certain functionality. But that behavior, you check it by going through each possible scenario that you can think of in a test as a test case. Okay. So moving on, you have another scenario here. So check the search bar functionality. So that's another functionality that you have, right? In your team. Your team also work on the body, on the description page. So there's a lot of test cases here, right? Checking the banners, checking the ads, checking the links, checking the context, checking whether paperback or Kindle works. Click on the follow button, looking at the follower for the author, you know, clicking on the reviews, a lot of things, a lot of pages, all right? Now, this shouldn't be only one scenario. This should be broken down into more scenarios. In an agile team, that's exactly what would happen. In a waterfall team, you will have the whole thing to do in one single release. Okay, payment functionality, once again, should be broken down into smaller modules. Okay, then you have validate the order history, another thing, right? So it creates a lot of things, some more scenarios over here that you can look at. Check the homepage, the homepage behavior for returning clients, validate the category product pages, validate customer service contact pages, check the daily deals, refund functionality. This is, it's a lot of things that an e-commerce page like this, right? And we didn't even touch the cart, right? We didn't even touch the checkout functionality. So it's a lot of things. An e-commerce page has a lot of things. So if you find yourselves working for an e-commerce, be ready, because these are the kind of things that you're gonna see. Okay. All right. Any questions before I move on? Very good. So now we're gonna move on to the next slide. So I had a video here that I wanted us to watch, but I think we're running short on time, and I don't want to keep you guys longer. Unless you guys are okay staying like an extra 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's do that then. So we'll run it to 9:40, not 9:30. So test case creation, guys. So this is a video really that explains test case creation. Can you guys hear the sound?
No.
Once again. Okay. I hate this, and he said there's nothing I had to do about it, but they lied to me. They lied to me. All right, I'll tell you what. I'm gonna post here in the chat the video URL. It's really like, I think like 3 minutes, so it should be quick. So the link is in the chat, guys. Start the video. Let me know before you start the video. We're gonna start the video at 9:20. Okay. Actually, 9:20. Anyways, test case creation, as I was explaining in the test scenario. In the test scenario, the test case creation becomes very important, because it's how you break down those scenarios. Okay. So a simple explanation here is a test case is a set of actions executed to verify a particular feature or functionality for your software application, which once again you find in a scenario. Guys, begin your video now, and we'll stop it at 9:23 and 31 minutes or so. Go ahead. All right, just let me know when you guys are done.
Done.
Yes, done.
Okay, very good. So we finished very similar. That's good. So with that said, let's talk about a little bit about this video. The video is very straightforward. I hope it was. And it is playing in very simple terms, really how you can, what a test case should be, what it should contain, right?
Yes.
So you can see here, let me move back here. So if you're looking at my screen, you can see here that he discussed the test scenario, now the test case that is involved with that test scenario and the preconditions. Remember when I showed you all of those test cases that one scenario had? So this one scenario here is just one. So in this place here, in this cell here, you would actually have, say, about 8 other scenarios, 8 other test cases. Okay, and each of these test cases will have so many different steps. Okay, so the way you can just create this easier is, so that you don't have extra long cells, just continue creating check functionality login in each cell individually while adding each test case pertaining to this test scenario. Okay, or you can simply just merge the cells on all of the test cases once that is done. Okay, so then we have the preconditions. Preconditions are things that you need to really consider before you begin running your test, things that you need to have. So let me show you something actually really quickly. This is this right here is kind of a template that you can use to create test cases. So going by this, you're going to start looking at test cases IDs. Now, you don't really have to create this manually like this. This is really for demoing purposes to you guys, but every test case you create has an ID. Normally, you'll be using tools like ALM, you can Rally or Jira, and the test case you create on it, it's going to have these IDs. Okay, so that's going to be his unique identifier. Excuse me. Once the same thing with created by, nothing less reviewed by, doesn't really have to be that cover. So reviewing a test case, you just really have to worry about scenarios instead. The test case description, yes, definitely you can talk about what the test case is supposed to do, right? But at the same time, you're also going to be doing that here in the expectation. So prerequisites or preconditions, like it was mentioned. So say for this scenario, for logging into a banking site, you will have to make sure that you have access to Chrome, to the Chrome browser, and that's really it. So if you do have access to Chrome browser, then you can carry on. Now, test data, which is something we're going to see in a moment, you can have the test data set up already. So for this particular scenario, test data would be creating a user, right? A user ID and a user password, two which we can use to log in into the account. Once you have all of this done, you're going to be looking at your scenario right here. So verified valid user ID and password on the on customer login. So if you have to verify this, remember all the test cases that we derive from just verifying the login information, right? This is just one test case here. So you're going to navigate to the banking site, right? So expected result is that it should open. Actual result is that, it's as expected. So if it's as expected, then you're going to pass it. If it fails, then you're going to say fail and you're going to create a defect. or, you know, depending. This is good for this is a good source also of traceability metrics, guys. Enter user ID and password. So the credentials, you know, you enter the credentials. So the access expected, so it passes. So remember, you can have multiple scenarios here. So multiple variations, user IDs, valid user ID, invalid password, invalid user ID, valid password, and so on and so forth. Click on the submit button. See if the submit button actually takes you to the page that it's supposed to. So if it's as expected, then it also passes. If not, then it's a fail, and you create a defect. And these are just other templates here. The same thing, just not as fancy. So once again, test case creation, guys, is as simple as that, really. Having a template like this. So when you have something like Rally, right? This is a tool for test management and story management. You know, when you have a tool like that to create a test case, it actually becomes a lot simpler, and you don't have to do so much of this. Okay. But just keeping you guys in the know here. Any questions about test cases? Okay. Now let's talk about test data creation, right? And why test data? So when we consider a test case, like the one that I just showed you, you saw that piece where I told you about, you know, the test data. So what is exactly test data in software? In order for you to do anything within the software, most of the time, you will need some data. That data can be in the form of IDs, social securities, names, passwords, right? Information about a claim. All of this is considered test data. Okay, so during test execution, this is what's going to help you get through your test cases properly. If you don't have the data, you won't be able to work on your test case. Now, you have to also consider that your test data has to be appropriate. You know, poor test data will not help you have enough coverage. You know, you can run the possibility that you won't have enough coverage because you did not create enough data or the proper data that you needed once again to run those test cases that you have. So why should you really create it before you begin your test cases, or before you begin executing your test cases? So once again, for a login scenario as the one that we saw just now, if we don't have a user ID and a password, how are we going to verify that we can actually log in? So the same applies for a lot of other things. Say in a system where you have say a case management system or a policy administration system, right? These are things that you may see depending on where you get hired, right? Depending on which job you accept, right? So a policy administration system involves a lot of things. It involves a lot of rules. It involves a lot of provisions, right? So you may not know what these things are, but it's a very tedious thing. It's a very tedious app that uses hundreds and hundreds of provisions and rules to get around to, like, say, a patient or a client wants maternity leave, right? So a mom wants maternity leave. So you guys really have no idea that when you actually take maternity leave or paternity leave or any of these leaves like that, it involves a lot of things in the background, right? So these provisions, regulations, and rules, they start going through a series of things in the background, in the back end, right? And they say, okay, rule 31, look at provision, blah blah blah, that involves a leave. So the leave now has different provisions, and those provisions have other rule sets that say, okay, if the person hasn't been in the company within 1 year, it denies it denies the request, right? But if it's been within a year, and then it's above certain tier, it involves a load of things, guys. So this is test data that you will want to have already created. Imagine finding yourself in a test scenario where you need to do those things and you don't have the proper test data. What are you gonna do? You won't be able really to test anything. So you start requesting the cases, right? If it involves a separate team, or you can create it yourself. So you go into the PAS system, right, to the policy administration system, and you start creating the data. You start creating the rules that you want, the provisions that you want for a happy path, for a negative path, for out of bounds, right? All of these things. So all of this data that you have ready, and so when it comes down to beginning your testing, then you have the data readily available to execute those tests and get the result that you expect, or that you're expecting. Okay, so where do you use it? Again, in your test cases. You want to make sure that you're always going through that test data. You want to make sure that you're always going through that you're creating that proper test data, so that your test cases, when you really go through it, it's actually giving you the right expectation. Now, really quickly, test data is used really in white box testing, performance testing, security testing, black box testing, okay, automated test cases, okay, in literally everything. Test data is very important. So do not think by any means that just creating a test scenario and a test case, it's all you need to do. You need to make sure that you have test data, okay? Questions about that?
Yes. So in test data, suppose login test scenario. So the developer team, they provide us a valid user ID and valid password to make sure it's working.
So it depends. So if you don't have access to the creation of the data, then yes, they will provide you with that. They will provide you with that information. However, more often than not, you will have the access.
So it's the test data, right?
Test data.
Okay.
So I mean, test data is we can say also that test data is also backend information. What do you want? Any kind of test, we need to back information. This is called test data.
Absolutely, it can be. So, I'm going to go back to that policy administration system. So in a policy administration system where you have so many rules and so many stuff, see, you have to go really by, say, for example, case IDs, right? So a case ID contains a lot of information. It contains a lot of information, as well as payload. If you look at the back end, if you look at your SQL data, it's going to have a payload. If you don't know what a payload is a file with a load of information. It can be in XML data, or it can be in JSON data, a schema. But it contains a lot of information, right? And this information is really everything about the claim, about the case that you're looking at. So you can use that case ID from the backend, to test, all depending on how the applications are formed, of course, or are connected to within each other. So let's go into a more simple scenario. You have a let's just look at the Amazon account that we looked at earlier. So in order for you to test the login information, you have to already have created an account. Okay, if you didn't create an account, there's no way that you can test the functionality for logging in because you don't have those credentials. Okay. Now, that can help you for negative scenarios, but the same can be said if you already have the data regardless. So you have to make sure. So your sprint is coming to an end. So you know what the sprint, what the functionality is. So before everything comes to you as a tester to test your story, you're gonna have already this data created. You're gonna say, okay, so my job is to test the login functionality. So I'm going to already create that. I'm gonna create 3 or 4 new accounts, and I'm gonna try them all to see. I'm gonna try alphanumeric. I'm gonna try special characters in the username. I'm gonna try a bunch of things, right? So you want to see if there's anything really that stands out. Once again, if you can break it, you win. Did that help? Did that help answer that question?
Yes, yes.
You said yes, yes. That means it possibly didn't.
Yeah.
When you repeat an answer twice, that means you still have doubts.
No.
All right, I'll believe you.
Thank you.
Anyone else has questions, guys? All right, very good. Was that a question? Okay. All right, guys, very good. Today's introduction took a little longer. I think we waited a bit for folks to join. Let's make sure that we're on time on the next session. Guys, keep in mind that you want to make sure that once again you're reviewing this material before the next session arrives. Don't wait until the class arrives to kind of brush the things. Just from time to time, just look at your notes. It's important. Okay. Another thing is that on the next session, we're going to start looking at test planning. We're not going to have any homework today for the next session. However, the next session, you will have a homework that will involve a lot of things that we've gone over already. So this will be very important for you to pay attention to. Okay.
Okay. So before ending, I have a question. So what type of question they asked in interview like these topics?
It depends the position that you're applying to. And when I say position, it means that you may be applying for a manual testing role, or you may be applying for an automation role, QA engineer or SDET, right? So depending on the role that you're applying for, but any of this really can be asked. So what is a test plan? How do you create a test plan? Tell me about a time where your test plan helped the team overcome an obstacle. Anything like that can happen because these are basic things that are required for any QA. It doesn't matter whether you're an automation engineer or whether you're a manual tester or whether you're an API tester. You need all of this basic knowledge, and it'll get asked, especially on the behavioral
So
side.
they ask theoretical question or like what based question, like what I did in project based or theoretical?
They'll ask anything. They'll ask trivial questions. They'll ask. It depends. So, see, I've done so many interviews, right? And so I base my questions based on the resume, the profile that I receive. So it takes me about half an hour to go through a profile and formulate questions through that profile. After that, after I have my already formulated questions, these are predetermined questions now that I'm going to ask. I also consider the questions that I'm going to ask based on the information that the candidate also provides me when I ask him about to relate some of his experience to me. When he does that, when the candidate does that, when she does that, Then I formulate more questions on the spot. Okay. And again, these questions can be as trivial as to, oh, wow. And how did you do that? You know, to,
Yeah.
to like, okay, so you mentioned that you worked with CI/CD pipelines. Now, can you elaborate a little more into what sort of configurations you had to perform, especially when you had issues with servers, right? So the questions can vary depending on the candidate, what the profile is, and you know, also how the candidate really presents themselves.
So workbench type question is more like CV, resume based and work based, more than theoretical, right?
Resume
Like
based,
they
mostly resume based.
they don't ask me that what is test data, what is test scenario, what is test case. It's not like that, right?
No, if you have well, if you have a manual testing application, yeah, you will be asked
Okay,
trivial
I
things
got
like
it.
that. So you want to
Mhm.
make sure that you can elaborate. So and this is one of the things. So when you guys you know, in the future, once we complete this course, you guys will be able to answer any of these questions properly. So if you're and you don't even have to answer it because you can already provide it. So when you're telling them about yourself, when you're talking about your experiences, you know, you're going to talk about you know, how you use test cases, the way you created test cases, how you kept metrics, and you know, how you did it in certain projects, right? In different projects. So you're going to have your dialogue already, so that you know, you'll be able to provide all of this information. So if you provide all of this information, you know, you're not leaving too much for the for the interviewer to come back at you with those silly questions. You understand?
Mhm.
All right. And you
Got
know,
it.
most interviews also, like, depending on what time, if some interviews are 45 minutes, some interviews are 30 minutes. I take interviews sometimes that are an hour and a half minutes, an hour and
Oh
a
my
half.
God.
So I've taken interviews that are 3
Tortured.
hours. So it depends. So if I have a senior candidate, a very senior
Mhm.
candidate applying for a senior position, then I'm gonna have to ask that candidate too many questions, because I need that person to be very capable. So it all depends. But also it also depends on the company, if they already have a process, a standard process. So the standard process is, okay, we're gonna do 3 sets of interviews. Each interview is gonna be 30 minutes or to 45 minutes. So you're gonna meet with one team first. You're gonna meet with the technical team first. You're gonna meet with the behavioral team later, and then you're gonna meet with the manager if all goes well, right? So that's a 3-set interview process. You know, which happens a lot. You can also just go to this.
Yeah, a lot.
Yes. So, you know, be prepared, be ready. You know, it's not an easy road ahead of you. But like I said, guys, or like Benjamin Franklin said, tell me and I forget, teach me and I'll remember, involve me and I'll learn. Okay.
Okay.
Awesome. Again, no homework for today. We'll look at homework next week, where you guys will be implementing a lot of things that you've learned between the beginning and the next class. So look forward to that. It's going to be a lot of fun.
So when, the
Okay, thank
next
you so
class,
much.
the Sunday is going to be your next class, or it's in the
Now,
weekdays?
next class is going to be, yeah, it's going to be next Wednesday. Next Sunday, you're going to have teacher Chanto going over more back end for you guys. So make sure that you formulate questions regarding APIs and backends, so that you can ask them to Shanto maybe before the class starts. It will be helpful for you and for him to understand where you need assistance with. And once again, feel free to reach out to any 3 of us, okay? Joel, Chanto, or myself.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, welcome.
So I have a question. So we're not doing what is the we started with the automation framework. So we are not doing it this Sunday.
No, so I think Jewel has a separate session tomorrow to kind of go over some questions with you guys there. So I think you can join that session and maybe see there. But what are you looking for exactly? A continuation of the creating
No,
the framework?
yeah, because we stuck on the framework. Like last class, Joel Bhai completed the framework, but we don't get it. Personally, I don't get it, and we are stuck
Okay,
in the framework
Yeah, we just
to building
started
up
and
because
then
the I think the class was messed up. Like sometimes it's completing with dependency issue or like running
okay,
issue. So it was really messed up. So we need a fresh class, like totally
okay,
first to last with a beautiful framework.
okay.
That's
So
why
let's
we
do something. So we have regular meetings. The instructors have regular meetings. So we'll talk about this so we can establish maybe some follow-up to that. But once again, Joel is following up tomorrow. So I think that's a good chance for you guys to ask those questions. But at the same time, if you find yourself that it's still complex, you know, again, formulate questions that can help us understand where you're lacking so that we can help you in that aspect. Because not everybody has the same issue. Everybody is stuck, might be stuck, but not everybody is going to be stuck on the same page of a book, right? So you might need different input, right, to on your continuation. Now, if everybody's stuck on the same spot, then that's a different story. I think that's something that we'll talk about. Let me actually stop this recording.
I don't know other